from the time I got out of jail to my first $1 million was 9 years. So then I jump, I'm a slow learner. I go, I want $2 million. It took me another year to go from 1 to 2. And then I thought to myself, why didn't you say 5? And then it took me another year and a half or 2 years to get to 5, right? And I was like, I keep selling myself short. Why didn't you say 25, right? And so it took me another couple of years to get there.
Off intuition, I never made plans. Shout to the achievers who are renegade fans. Beyonce out here buying drinks from her supporters. It's crazy, she got her own lemonade stands. These are bars I stockpiled, no I'll check. But I get paid off of that work, that's a now check.
What's up, vlog? This is Travis. I am here with a very, very special guest. His name is James. He is founder and owner of Powerful You, a personal evolution company, the first of its kind. Very extraordinary individual. He has went through a lot. We have a very similar background in terms of coming from nothing and then building something. So I'm very excited for this particular interview. And lo and behold, James.
Travis, nice to be here, man. You know, like he said, we have a very similar background. I was incarcerated, and then I made my way to the top, and so that's what we're here to kind of talk about today, right?
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you, man, so tell us a little bit about your beginning. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing. What happened? Like, what led to your incarceration? Like, what?
What's funny is we have a book, Perception, Seeing is Not Believing, in a movie with the same title. And so, people ask all the time, like, what is the book about? What is the movie about? And it's exactly what you're saying, is that if your life doesn't seem to make sense, then you're not looking at things properly, because in fact, given everything you've been through, your life makes perfect sense. And that's what the book and the movie is about, is that you're on a path to somewhere, and if you don't interrupt that path, you may end up somewhere you don't want to be. And so for me, that was incarceration, but it started in kindergarten, actually. My parents got divorced early. My dad wasn't much in the picture, he was off doing drugs. My mom was a manic depressive with bipolar disorder, for anybody knew what that was. And, I grew up in a tough environment, right? It was tough. I had a lot of learning disabilities. So when I went to kindergarten in my first year, what happened was, I was put into what they call special ed back then. I think it's called resource now, right? And I remember when I was going to special ed class the first day, my teacher brings me up in front of the room and she goes, hey, Jimmy, it's time to go to your special ed class. And she says, come up to the front. And she literally puts me in the front of the room and says, only stupid and retarded kids go to special ed.
Oh, wow.
I was like, I mean, even at 5 years old, something just went bad, right? Yeah. And I was just shocked. I was just standing there. And she made the whole class call me stupid on the way out the door. And, I wish I could tell you that was just a one day occurrence, but that actually happened every single day. She'd tell me I was stupid, make the class call me stupid every day when I was going into special ed. And, the first day I went home and I told my mom, and I said, Mom, this happened. And she just gave me the worst advice anybody's ever given anybody. World's a hard place, right? People are mean. You're just going to have to get used to it, right? And so, what we were trying to demonstrate through the book and the movie is that, we all have shit that happens in our lives, right? And without interruption, that shit helps form a belief system,
right,
which helps shape your view of the world, right? And so if you look at my view of the world based on that, what do I have? I've got I'm stupid, I'm dumb, I'm not good enough. Oh yeah, and the stuff my mom piled on top was the world is a hard place, you're just gonna have to get used to it, people are mean. So imagine that is my filter for life. Those circumstances started me on a path to jail, right? To being an addict, to doing all the shit that I did. And, the question is why, right? Why is that? And so I'll go back to that statement. If life if your life isn't how you want it to be, right? It's not because you've done anything wrong. It's because you made the only decisions you could with the information that's available to you. That was my pool of information, right? And so now that is the view I see the world through.
I've known James for over a year. James is the founder and owner of Powerful You. And one of the things that connects us is we have a very similar story. James comes from a very troubled background. He didn't have much growing up. I come from a very troubled background. I didn't have much growing up. And he even got in trouble with the law. And I got in trouble with the law. And so he was able to take those circumstances and really overcome his situations. And even though he had different opportunities than me, the point is, I think we both resonate with the sense of being able to overcome. Like, what does success really mean, right? Like, regardless of your background, regardless of where you come from, what does it really mean to live your mission, to see it, to have a vision, and to really go deep dive, just to go deep into your vision, right? And we resonated with that. And I think whenever there's a common struggle, there's also a common purpose. And whenever there's a common purpose, I think people connect more on that level. So, that's the point of telling your story. Is to connect with people with common struggles and to lead them with a common purpose.
I think the first rule to success is this. It is taking responsibility for one's life, right? If you're a person who wants to blame, it's the world's fault, it's this person's fault, it's that person's fault. Those things may seem true, but until you can learn to take ownership for your situation, you are never going to create anything good for your life. Period.
That reminds me of a very, very, very powerful quote. That lets us know that we are on. What does it say? It says that we're not who we think we are. We are who we think you think we are. You know what I'm saying? So when I hear you say that a teacher impacted you that well, or that much, I should say, is because of that internal dialogue that you tell yourself after she said something that bad about you.
Right. And so
then it really plays on your head.
Right. No, you got it. Exactly right. And so the question is, if it's not the abuse, what dictated my life?
Yeah.
Right? And here's the part that I can take responsibility for, because people hear situations like that and they go, and I'm like, how do you take responsibility for abuse? Right? And so I'll say, well, here's how it works. The teacher did what the teacher did, right? For whatever reasons she did it, right? Now, I had a choice in that situation. The choice was what to believe about myself having lived through that abuse, because that's what dictates your circumstances, not the abuse itself, what you chose to believe about yourself because of the abuse.
Will Smith said, and I thought this was very profound, he said, it's not your fault that person was being a scumbag, but it is your responsibility to overcome that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what are you overcoming? What you choose to believe about yourself. And so it was my choice to believe I was stupid. It was my choice to believe that I was not good enough. It was my choice to believe that life is hard. It was my choice. Now, I tell people that, you know what they say all the time? They're like, James, don't do that. You're victim shaming yourself. And I look at them and I say, stop taking my power away. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, if I didn't have a choice, then I'm stuck forever. Because if you think that your abuse or your hard circumstances define you, you are stuck forever, right? But if it was my choice, right? And I made the most logical choice given the circumstances, so I can let myself off the hook that way, right? Is that, okay, here's a person of authority, here's my mom, they're telling me things, why not believe them, right? But it was my choice. And the reason that is so important is because if it was my choice, that means I can choose again.
So tell us about what led to like the jail incident. Like what happened?
Well, see, I was one of these people who was full of hope and spit and vinegar, right? I mean, I was going to make my life successful no matter what. But the problem is that what you have to understand is perception shapes your view of the world. So what shapes perception, right? And, going back to that situation for 1 second, it's because it was my choice to believe all these negative things, that's what shaped my perception, right? And that's what created my shitty life, not the abuse, right? The abuse just gave me a choice, not my mom. My mom just gave me a choice. And so when we talk about what got me into trouble, what you have to realize is that if you have a belief set that you're stupid, that you're not good enough, that you're never going to succeed, that life is hard and people are mean, and that's the view you see the world through, you are never, ever, ever going to succeed. I don't care how hard you try. And that was my circumstance. I was out there swinging for the fences, swinging for the fences, swinging for the fences. Let's not forget, and this is one of the most important parts, after that first year, I made my mom take me out of special ed because I was never going to be teased again. And so, I had at most a 5th grade education, right? I didn't spell very good. I read fairly good after I got out of jail, but I didn't have the tools most people had to be successful.
Right.
So as much as I tried, I always tell people, it's like, I always tried to relocate my life, but the first person who showed up was me, and all my shit came with me, right? So it was like, I can't escape me. So here's the answer to your question is this, is understanding that is understanding perception. Now here's the bottom line understanding of perception. You do not see reality. As a matter of fact, you have no context of reality. And so people go, what do you mean by that? I see reality, it feels real. And it's like, no, you don't see reality. You impose a narrative on reality, right? Because of the way perception works and because of the way your mind works, right? You are not seeing what's going on outside of you. You're seeing your interpretation of what's going on outside of you based on the context it's given from your past experiences. So those beliefs are the filter through which you see reality.
So I just started creating content a couple months ago, and like really creating content for myself a couple months ago, and I felt like here's the thing. I've been behind the scenes for so long.
Right.
And I kind of felt like there needs to be more people telling the story of what it's like to be behind the scenes,
right.
And to work with so many dope people, dope companies, and people really making change in the world. I don't think there's enough, there's just not enough stories being told about that. And what I wanted to do is, so I have Interlight Media, but I'm thinking I really want to show people all the cool and amazing things that people are doing. And so I'm going to build this to be similar to how Gary Vee built his.
Right.
I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for me and build an apparatus that big, just so people can see all the dope stuff that's going on. Because even though I love what Gary Vee does, but one thing I would notice about Gary Vee is he's more so focused on him.
Right.
And I don't want it to be more so focused on me. I want it to be more so focused on what is going on.
Right.
All right. So you get locked down. You start reading books. You finally get out of prison. Now what?
Okay. So just before I get out, I have an epiphany, right? So I used to write these long lists of people who I felt like had harmed me, right? And I was trying to offer them forgiveness. And as I started to do that, I didn't really like the traditional form of forgiveness because it's all about giving them the power. So I changed the definition of forgiveness. And I would recommend most people do this as well. So forgiveness no longer became about letting somebody else off the hook. It became about letting myself off the hook. I leave them to them. And so if you look at my teacher, for example, what I said was, whatever reason she did for what she did, right, is her thing, and she can go do that, right? I'm going to remove energy from that. I'm going to forgive myself for believing that I was not good enough, believing that. Because when I looked at this list of all the people that I wrote that I needed to forgive, I looked down and I had this epiphany. It was this: the only common denominator between all those situations is me. Period, right? It's like, it's me. So maybe it's all my fault, right? And that's what led me back to the idea of it was my beliefs that dictated how my life. It was my choice. It was my choice what to believe. And then on that day, I took my power back because I decided it was all me, right? And I didn't take responsibility for other people's actions. I took responsibility for what I chose to believe and what those beliefs created. Because back to your original question, is everybody's on a path to somewhere.
So how long did it take from you after you got out to start Powerful You?
So it took me, and now this seems like an eternity to me. When I tell people this number, it's kind of mind-blowing. So from the time I got out of jail to my first $1 million was 9 years, right? Now, that was it. I had $1 million. I was like, okay, now let's go back to that what you believe is possible thing. I was like, damn, why didn't I say 2? Because the only thing I was focused on, the first thing I was focused on, I want to make $125,000 a year, right? And that took me like a year or two to get there, right? And then I was like, all right, I want to get $1 million when I got there. And so when I got to $1 million, I was like, I could have just as easily had 2. Why didn't I say 2? So then I jump, I'm a slow learner. I go, I want $2 million. It took me another year to go from 1 to 2. And then I thought to myself, why didn't you say 5? Like, why didn't you say 5? And then it took me another year and a half or 2 years to get to 5, right? And I was like, I keep selling myself short. Why didn't you say 25, right? And so it took me another couple of years to get there, right? And I was like, okay. So, my next goal is something like, I haven't decided, I think it's $1 billion, because I'm just gonna skip right up because I don't want to sell myself short again. Yeah. But I have to believe that's possible. And that kind of dictates that path. So it was 9 years from the day I got out of jail till I made my first $1 million.
How many companies have you founded, started, and and just kind of like began?
That's an interesting question. So how many I've founded, started, idolized, and began, it was a totally different story. How many have I founded, started, took to, completion and sold for massive amounts of money, right? Those are different answers.
Sure.
So,
well, how many have you done that?
So essentially, my biggest break was in the software industry.
Right.
So I went in as a junior partner into a technology company, third person in, got a little bit of equity, helped build that company, became the president of that company, got more equity, and then I sold that company to a much larger company, right? And then I worked for that company and ran 5 or 6 offices nationwide for them. Then that company sold to, the massive company Oracle. Oracle bought that company, and then I bought my original company back from Oracle because they weren't interested in that one product because it wasn't an enterprise solution. So I bought that back, and then 1 year later sold it for a massive profit in comparison to what I built it for. And then, I've built up in, several little small deals.
7, 8 figures?
What did I sell it for?
7, 8 figures, which one?
I don't actually know the math on that, but I guess it'd be 7 figures is 1 to 10. Is that what you're saying? Well, it's got to be more than that.
Okay.
I don't talk about such things.
I
right?
got you.
I do own a parking garage, though, so that tells you anything. Yeah. No, so then I've picked up small products along the way, or services, and sold those for small amounts of money, and now I'm really trying to focus into the thing that I'm trying to do right now is my way of giving back is to launch products and services that actually do good in the world, right? And so that's always been my passion. I believe that if you have the means to do something, you have the responsibility to do something. I look at a lot of people, even in the personal development industry, and they seem to be very self-serving in nature. And I think to myself, I know that you want to be the king of the world, but what's the point of being the king of the world if the world's on fire? Oh, and by the way, it's on fire. Now, here's one fundamental key to life. Life is messy, and people do dumb shit, right? And if you understand that, then you've got the key to life right there. Life is messy. Why is it hard? Because people are trying to take that which is messy and make it perfect. It ain't gonna never be perfect, because the second part of the statement, people do stupid shit, right? And so a lot of times what I tell people is, here, I'm gonna give you the first key to success. stop doing stupid shit. Right? And they're like,
I kind of think, though, if people thought it was stupid, they wouldn't do it.
well, but that's exactly right, because they don't admit to themselves that life is messy and people do stupid shit. And by the way, you're the person doing stupid shit. And if you don't think you're doing stupid shit, it's most definitely you.
So self-examination.
Self-examination.
Yeah.
But here's what the important part of it is. Let's say that I want to change, right? Everybody's on a path to somewhere. Without interruption, they're going to end up somewhere they don't want to be. And so here's what they don't calculate. What is the cost of not changing? Right? People don't calculate the cost of not changing, because if they did, they want to change, right? They'd put enough adversity behind what happens if I don't. People are always focused on what happens if I do, right? But ask yourself the question, what happens if I don't? Because here's the key, and it's really, really important, is you are on a path to somewhere, and it's probably somewhere you don't want to be.
Yeah.
And so I make some simple examples. You can map this out, and this is a self-examination. Let's take, 4 different categories. Let's take relationships, let's take finances, let's take health and fitness, and your career, right? And so what I would tell people is there's no guessing game on where you're going to end up in all 4 of those categories, right? Is if you calculate the rate that you're currently going and push it into the future, you'll know where you'll be at. So let's look at weight, for instance, because it's
turn your life into a quadrant.
Yeah, you
and
turn
then kind of like decide.
Well, you got to look at your results. So you got to take the past results and push them into the future. So if right now, right, in the last year, I've gained 10 pounds, right? Without interruption, I'm going to gain 10 more pounds plus interest in the next year, right? So it's really easy to go from 50, 5 years from now, I'm going to be 60 pounds heavier. That's the cost of not changing, right? How much debt am I in, right? Well, if right now I'm in, $5,000 worth of debt or $50,000 worth of debt, and it's growing at a rate of, $18,000 a year, 5 years from now, I'm going to be here unless I go bankrupt. And so what I'm saying is that everybody's on a path to somewhere. You have to be the person that interrupts your path. But you won't do it unless you calculate the cost of not changing, because you don't think there's a cost associated with where you are now, but there is.
Okay. So how many companies would you say altogether?
Well,
how many?
I'm going to tell you this.
How many have you failed?
I'm going to tell you this.
I'm going to tell you this because I want to know.
I failed.
Yeah.
I have failed a shit ton more times than I've succeeded. I failed. Nobody wants to hear about the failures, right? Or how hard it was.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people. People always ask me, it's like, was it hard? And I'm like, oh yeah, it was hard, but that's not the point. Was it worth it? And the answer is that I always tell people that success is like, I'm gonna go bang my head against this wall right here, and when I get through the other side, I'll be the only person standing here, right? And that's what success looks like, right? Because you don't know the path there, and so you have to literally be persistent. So one of the things I have is massive amounts of persistence. I just don't quit, just don't quit, just don't quit. I also don't see failures as failures, right? I always see them as, learning opportunities. But, I don't know if that's not the way I put it, is that you have to be able to, figure out the ways not to do things sometimes on the ways to do things. And so I always give this recommendation to entrepreneurs. This one's great. And so a lot of times I'll have entrepreneurs ask me, what does it take to be successful? And I'm like, I'm going to give you the keys here, right? I said, when you have an idea, what you have to do is you have to map your way from where you are to where you want to go, right? And it has to be a real world scenario, like social media. It's like, you can't go from 1 to 10,000 users and, 10 to, a million, whatever. You got to be able to get to 1 to 8 to 5 to 15 to 28 to 32 to I got 100, I got 1,000. It's got to be real world scenarios, right? And you got to map your way to your destination in a real world scenario, right? And so you think about what it's going to take to get there in a real world scenario. I said, once you're convinced you can do it, then you have to take all that work and you got to throw it away, right? And they're like, why got to throw it away? And I'm like, because what you don't understand is it's never going to look like that. And every time you attempt to make it look like that, right, you're creating massive resistance in the process, right? And that's the place where everybody gets caught up. It's like when it doesn't look the way you thought it was going to look, you think that you're failing, right? And you think that you're failing, you try to force a thing to be that which it isn't, to fit some model of success that you thought that it was, without ever considering maybe it's perfect. Right? And that's what it is most businesses fail because people don't adapt to the changes, or they try to force what is into the way they think it should be instead of dealing with what is.
So let me ask this question. Personal evolution company, tell me what that means.
So evolution in my means is that I don't think that, change in the real part is proper. It's not the way to describe it, because it's not about changing, right? Because, one day I saw my son in the yard with a stick, and he was for an hour twirling in circles and hitting the ground, and he was in pure bliss. I looked out the window and I thought, I don't have anything to teach him. I need to learn from him, right? Because what he has, I lost, right? So a lot of change is about not becoming something different. It's about removing all of the bullshit that sits between the most authentic, real version of you. Right? Period, right? And so what I tell people is that sometimes change is about stop doing things. What are the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that stand between who I am now and who I want to become?
Wow. That's
right.
I agree with that 100%. So how do we get from one stage of our life to the next stage in the most integrity, self-examined way possible? That's
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like weight. It's such an easy example, and I'm not trying to pick on people who are trying to lose weight, but because I've lost a lot of weight in my life. I lost like 40 pounds 7 times in 9 years, right? And so how we do it is, if you look at weight, for example, right? It's like people are like, I got to work out. But then they still eat like shit.
Yeah.
And it's like, no. Stop doing, don't try to insert a good habit on top of a bad habit. Period. That's never going to work. And so it's like, well, eliminate the habit of eating bad. Well, that's not the full story, because this is the part everybody else missed. They talk about habits. Is the fundamental thing behind habits is this, is what is the belief that's driving you to overeat in the first place? What are you trying to escape, right? Period. Because when you look at addiction, and all addiction, it is nothing more than an attempt to escape. End of story. So if you take away the belief that's driving you to want to escape, then the addiction or the habit inherently goes away as a part of that.
Wow.
And that's the part they miss, because, there's a really alarming statistic on change, and here it is. 90% of change fails. 90%, that's out of the gate. But that's not even the most scary statistic. Here's the most scary statistic. Out of the people who do change, the 30% that do change, 70% of those give it all back.
Wow.
Right? And so the effective rate of change
is still
right. It's like people gain the weight back. The second marriages fail because the effective rate of change is actually 3%. And the reason is because if I'm trying to change, lose weight, for example, if I'm trying to lose weight and I start changing at the level of habits, and let's say I really grind it out and I white knuckle it. This is why white knuckling doesn't work. And I get to my goal at the end and I lose the weight. As soon as I take all of my conscious attention off of losing the weight, right? If I didn't inadvertently change the belief that was driving the behavior, as soon as I take my conscious attention off, the belief resets the behavior and I'm right back to where I started or further down. And that's why lottery winners always, lose all their money and things like that, because it's not Change doesn't happen at the level of habits. It happens at the level of beliefs.
Wow.
Period.
Yeah.
And if you don't change the belief that's driving the habit, you are never going to sustain change.
True.
Period.
True.
When we launched Powerful You, I actually thought it was going to be a little bit more like impact theory. We were just going to launch shows. And so shortly after that, I became friends with the Billies, went out and saw their studios. And I know you're friends with Tom and Lisa as well. And I was like, I don't have as much money as he does. I'm never going to put on this type of production. So I had to morph and change my business idea because he already did what I did. It took me about a year to sell my company in the time I was envisioning what Powerful You was going to be. And so Tom had started up in that year. And so by the time when I launched, he was already there. So I was like, we're going to have to change.
Gotcha.
And so, we built studios. We have white screens over here, and you can see over here, we've got many different looks. And so the idea is that not only is this going to be a Powerful You studio, it can also be a podcast studio. So you could come in here, do your show, throw your logo up on here, and then it would help local entrepreneurs also be able to film content
So
here
like
as
a
well.
co-networking event. That's
co-networking.
Yeah. That's really good. That's really good. Good idea. Yeah, and this is the podcast room, right?
So this right here, we're doing a little construction. We just had an event here a little bit ago, and we haven't completely broken down. But the idea of this is supposed to be like a Joe Rogan type podcast studio where you can sit, you can have up to 4 people in a discussion here. People like this concrete here, and I don't even know if you noticed it yet, but most people won't notice, but it's actually wallpaper.
I know.
Right.
Yeah.
I've
been here a couple times.
Yeah. I was saying that.
Yeah.
So,
Green screen.
The green screen. The green screen look here.
Got to do a green screen video.
Yeah. And then my wife really likes the green, so she designed.
It makes it feel more earthy.
Right.
And
so I actually own the 2 office buildings this is in, and so I wanted a lot of windows. I actually designed the space myself. I designed this space and I designed my house.
You're a big Einstein fan.
I'm a big Einstein fan. So when Einstein came out, what I liked about Einstein is that everybody thought science was wrapped up because of Newton, right? And so, when Einstein came out, is that he was able to reject the said narrative and to look at the world differently.
Yeah.
And so that's what I like about Einstein, and that's what I try to do. I always tell people, it's like, my bottom line theory to life is question everything.
Question everything.
Question everything.
That's what science is about, right? So what's the next step? What's the next step for you? What's the next step for Powerful You? What is, tell the people.
So, so here's the next step is that, we're dealing in the world of COVID. There are no events going on. There's nothing like that. I've got a next level platform that I've launched. We talked about the other day. I'm not ready to talk about publicly yet. And that's going to be about human connection. Helping humans connect deeply on a very deep level, right? That's number 1. Number 2 is that when we come out of this, we don't know what the world's going to look like. The only thing we do know is there's a lot more people in trauma than when this whole thing started. And so we are going to be supporting people getting out of that personal trauma, trying to rebuild their lives. We're going to give them the tools. We're going to put a big push behind our movie because it will change your life.
The movie is
great.
Movie is incredible, by the way, guys.
And the book is way better than the movie. I mean, people will read that book. It's a blueprint for changing your life. It'll tell you how to get whatever you want, and it lays it out in really simple terms. It is not ambiguous.
Yeah.
Right? You do what's in that book, things will change, and they will change rapidly. All the way from how to stop realizing you're doing stupid shit, to stop doing stupid shit, to rebuilding your narrative. Because here's the thing, most people don't realize that they are the storytellers of their lives. They get to write the story, right? And so the question is that, did you let somebody else write your story, or did you write your story?
Right.
So, right?
Yeah.
Because if you point the finger, somebody else wrote your story, it is time for you to write your own story.
Amen to that. So listen, guys, please follow Powerful You and everything they got going on. They got some amazing stuff coming up that we're partnering up on. that is going to kind of blow you away. So I cannot wait to share that with you guys. Outside of that, James, it's been absolutely amazing, brother.
I've been waiting to do this and then prove it through my music without being disputed, and that's the strangest part. People say I'm smart, but I do dumb things, like calling old friends and hanging up on one ring. It got me tripping, maybe it's one thing, without A. Marie to come sing. Back in front of 743, reciting this law scroll. It was written before, yo.